This is going to be a little bit unfiltered, but I want to take a minute to set the stage. This is mostly Sara's show. I'm here to sort of guide the conversation as needed. But just to give you guys a little bit of a context for why we want to do this talk and why it was really important to us, it's because it hits home with me. It's very close to my heart. It's very close to Good&Co's heart. When I started Good&Co from my couch about 7 years ago here in San Francisco, my co-founder is Dr. Carrie Schofield, someone I found on Elance, like a freelancing platform. And I had no idea what psychometrics was, or the science behind psychology was. Basically, I posted a project, and Carrie basically solved my problem in her application to the project. And since then, Carrie got involved with Good&Co. At a time, she was like, so Carrie is like this brilliant scientist, 2 PhDs from King's and Oxford, just crazy talent. And at the time, I didn't know Carrie was autistic, and was amazing talent. And just over the years, 7 years working with Carrie, she's so part of Good&Co. I've learned a lot about neurodiversity in the workplace, but also how best to work with this amazing talent that we're all missing out on. So I heard Sara talk at an event in the UK in Crewe, and it was just like, mind was blown, right? It connected all these crazy dots for me. Even though I knew Carrie, over the last 7 years, we had been through our trials and tribulations, ups and downs, the typical startup cycle. Carrie's talk just connected so many more dots and taught me so much more than I thought I already knew. So I want to make sure that Sara got a larger stage and talk about this issue that's very close to my heart, but obviously she's sort of the pallbearer of this. Sara's going to take about 5-7 minutes sharing with everyone sort of some key nuggets and just some high-level insights. And then the last 20 minutes of the conversation, we'll do a bit of a Q&A. And if anyone has any questions along the way, please raise your hand and ask. Let's keep this let's keep this casual, conversational, because I think that's where we'll get the best of the conversation.
Thank you
so
much. Well, you certainly got me a bigger stage. Definitely managed to do that, thank you. I'm going to begin with the myth of normalcy. I just think there's no greater myth than the myth that we are normal, that there's such a thing as normal people, and if you don't behave and act that way, then you're the abnormal ones. And the reason neurodiversity is so fascinating is because that's where you put all the abnormal people into neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is brain diversity. It's difference of the brain. It is where you will find your autistics, such as myself, people with ADHD, that's attention, people with sensory processing, so aversions to light or sensitivities to light. Some people experience colour when they taste. Some people will taste a word. It's the way that the brain connects, receives senses, and allows us to think and make sense of the world. So that is what it is to be neurodiverse. You make sense of the world differently from your predominant peers. So what is in the mix of neurodiversity? Well, the sociopaths are there too. And the great thing about neurodiversity is we do need different minds. You need different minds in your workforces to diversify the way you think, the way you can move forward, because no one ever achieved anything great or wonderful when we were all thinking from the same song sheet and delivering what the status quo anticipated. For me, neurodiversity does smash open the concept because most of the people in this audience, can I just see a raise of hands? Who knows someone who is autistic, ADHD, OC? Oh wow, okay. So can I keep those hands up if they're a close relative? So you're a child or a brother? Yeah, okay. So the people with their hands up, you're probably neurodiverse too. This room is full of neurodiverse people. And this is what I mean, it is a myth to think that we are all the normal ones who have gotten this far. Because I used to think that. I used to think I'm normal, even though I wasn't. I'm autistic, which means I could have different barriers and different experiences, which means that some environments and workplaces are simply not accessible. And for me, neurodiversity is everywhere. I see it a lot in science, I see it a lot in tech, in our creative industries, but especially within entrepreneurs. Why? Because no one will employ us. No one will employ us. So if I'm saying that entrepreneurs are neurodiverse, like a lot of them are, not all, This means that this room and this conference will be full of people today who have had to work differently in different avenues to get here. And it means that you are in a fantastic position to help change the shocking state of affairs in the UK, which is 16% of autistic people are in employment. I'm not in employment, I'm self-employed, because the system didn't want me, because of the way I behaved, and because of the difference in socialisation, and because I burn out and break down. So I'm asking for companies to revolutionise the way they think about what work even is. Work ethics, work practices, the interviewing process, the way we even go about bringing people into the system. Because if you use the same standardised texts and frameworks and evaluations that we've already been through as neurodiverse people, we've been through it at school, and a lot of us fell through the cracks there, only then to go through it into employment. Look at different ways. Look at maybe a week-long process of interviewing an autistic person. And I will go into some of the details with Samar about the barriers that we face. But I want to focus on the virtues of autistic people, because there's such a deficit model on autism, what we can't do and what, oh, I can't do this and I burn out from that. Autistic virtues are traits. Virtues, according to the Greeks, virtues wasn't just your moral. If you're a basketball player and if you're tall, you've got good virtues. So it's your characteristics in terms of that height could excel his role. So for autistic people, our virtues can excel the way that you are trying to deliver a product, an idea, an innovation. Autistic virtues, some of us, well, mostly is an attention to detail, an aversion to small talk, and a huge hyper-focus on special interest areas. And if you employ someone who loves what they do, genuinely loves what they do, when Aristotle and the Stoics were arguing about what happiness is, what defines happiness, they came up with a few things. They said comfort within the environment. Everyone wants to be comfortable and feel safe. Integrity to who you are. And they said this. They said intense, focused, repetitive interests. That's a red flag for autism. And yet here we are, the definition of happiness. And if you want a happy workforce, if you want happy people within it, come to us, but you cannot pick and choose the parts that you want from your neurodiverse workforce, which does mean that you have to adapt. And it is about looking at how economic you can make those adaptations, not only for neurodiverse people, but if you make changes for us to access your workplace, you will also benefit the person who's going through grief, the person who's going through depression and mental health, the person who's almost on the cusp of a nervous breakdown, because if you give them one more task or demand, you're going to lose them. If we make these changes for this subgroup of people, we'll revolutionise the way that we treat your workforce, because you'll start treating them as people. And the best thing is, the fact that this room is full of these people today watching me, it means that you're open to this. You're open to this, you're here, you're sat here, you're listening. That's the hardest part for me, is to even get you here. So thank you for being the type of minds who want to at least consider this, consider including us. Thank you. Oh, and one more thing, Steve Silberman, Great San Francisco. What's the word, San Franciscarian? That sounds like a fish. Well, he said, just because a computer isn't running Windows or Mac doesn't mean it's not broken. We do run from different operating systems. Everybody does. And that's what neurodiversity is. So bring those different operating systems into your workforce. Thank you.
One of the things I want to start talking with you about, Sara, is and get your thoughts on when you gave the talk last time, why it was very meaningful for me, because I learned a lot through trial and error with Carrie. And oftentimes we get caught up in looking at neurodiversity as just a token diversity measure, right? And now when I look back at the last 7 years, the immense innovation that Carrie's built at Good&Co even in an atypical way, has created massive advantage and value for the business. That Carrie, for example, sometimes I wouldn't hear from her for a week and it would frustrate me. I'm like, you're a co-founder, where have you disappeared, right?
Yeah.
And at first it was difficult to deal with that, but as I understood her patterns more, I was like, if Carrie works 2 nights in a row after having disappeared for a week, because she wasn't feeling great, right? And she created more value in those 2 nights working nonstop than like 5 psychometricians could do in a month. Do you think businesses are missing out on that value because they're not actively seeking out neurodiverse people?
Oh gosh, absolutely. Absolutely. I looked at myself in a spoon and I was like, why am I upside down on this side and facing the right way? And I know it's to do with the way that light bends. And I asked the question to my autistic community. And within a few hours, I came back with full scientific diagrams of the way that light refracts and bounces, and I had a clear answer. We are intense. And that's probably why he goes away to recuperate, but it's because, no offense, you're intense from our perspective. It's all relative. So to the autistic person, the socializing and the demands and wanting to talk about this process, if I can just say, I've done that and I've done this and just trust me, just give me a week and I'll throw it out, we do work in different ways, but we do have this strange thing, and I understand why, between employers and employees with trust. About them trusting us to do the work, and often I remember having supervisors kind of hovering over me, just making sure, observing that I'm doing the work. And I can't work like that. I cannot work when you are watching and observing me, because it's stifling to my creative process, and also I just can't think. So going away and isolating oneself allows me to talk to this. It is how I operate as an autistic person. Yes, it's definitely you're missing out is the answer to that.
And we learned this over the years, and we actively recruit in the neurodiverse community. Quite frankly, not because you want to hire for diversity, but because it's an immense business advantage.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a well-kept secret in some ways. Obviously, we don't want to keep it a secret for much longer.
Yeah.
I remember this one anecdote with Carrie. After we got acquired, and our parent company has invested in the business quite a bit for the long term, and it was just a natural progression for me. Carrie, you were like the chief psychometrics officer. Now you need to be a manager. You need to build a team and hire people and train them and sort of grow, and this is like the obvious next stage for your career.
Yeah.
That whole idea bombed, because Carrie just didn't want to, not that she didn't want to, she didn't want to disappoint people, and she tried to adapt to that new environment and the new reality, because we were looking at it as like, it just makes sense, right? So basically, I remember this one anecdote, I realized later that Carrie had to prepare mentally for like 6 hours before a 1-hour meeting that was scheduled. And basically she had to have thought of answers for every possible permutation and combination or scenario that could come up in that meeting. And she would kill it in that meeting, and people would only see that 1 hour, but they forgot how much strain and how much work it was for her to just mentally prepare for that.
Absolutely. So the reason I'm looking away from you, for example, is because I can visualize what you're saying. So I'm visualizing the room, I'm visualizing her stressing out, I'm visualizing her like thinking for 6 hours. I can't do that when I look at your face. And what I do is I look at your face, and I don't hear a word that you say. So that processing can go out as well. So yeah, we work so differently, and when we're not supported or understood, it means that we can end up just completely collapsing out of the workforce. And I relate to the challenge that she's going through, because with Agony Autie, I went from being unemployed on my kitchen floor and thinking my life is over, because I basically became chronically ill. With Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, it's a collagen disorder, very stretchy ligaments. And now I'm getting to grasps of being a founder of Agony Autie and speaking to hundreds of thousands of people. And what happened is, a few weeks ago, not even a few weeks ago, 10 days ago, and please don't be alarmed when I say this, I will say this though to break stigma, I am the type of autistic that punches myself in the face when I become distressed. And I have great shame over it. But I won't hide it, because it isn't a threat to you. And what I beg is that if you understand that, okay, this autistic person has just too many demands, not a lot of help, and her bucket is full because of my pain and my other barriers and my sensory overload. I cope in a non-constructive way. But if we can have employers creating quiet, safe spaces or quiet zones, so instead of a social breakout area, that's a nightmare for an autistic person. I'm so sorry, I've been working all day and now you want me to what? Socialise? That's more work. So if I could go to either a quiet room, there's literally nothing, no senses, devoid of it, and I can interact or integrate how I want with myself, or a sensory room. Sensory room's different. Sensory rooms are sensory seeking, so that's where you can go la la la, fidget, 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 bang, 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 because you can't do it there because you're disrupting the workforce. But if you can do it in your room there, you don't have to go home, you don't have to go and get fired. You can literally nip in and out of your work because, hey ho, presto, you've got an accessible employer and an accessible environment. What was your question,
Um,
I forgot. I'm so sorry.
so I follow that up with, this is something, again, we learned to trial and error with Carrie.
Yeah.
Now, Carrie can come to the office when she wants. She can work from wherever she wants. If we don't have daily check-ins, that's completely okay. But when Carrie goes to work, for example, one night she was working and she came up with like 18,000 multiple permutations and combinations of different unique insights that get delivered as part of the assessments. And I could not have hired 10 psychometricians to do that work in like 4 months.
Yeah.
So like Woody, and it's immense, it's insane. Like the models that she's built, people can't imagine that, and she comes up with it.
Yeah.
I remember you mentioning one thing that there are autistic and neurodiverse people at the core of some of the biggest innovations in the last century.
Yeah.
It's just that it's not well known. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, it breaks my heart. I see autistic culture and autistic innovation and creation absolutely everywhere. I mean, some of you are even holding it in your hands, like right now, and filming from it. We are heavily in the sciences, especially with space programs, which means that a lot of the technology has come filtered down to Earth. It's helped with our health as well. But I felt we've advanced and moved humanity forward, but we don't get the recognition. We don't get the recognition because a lot of people don't own up to it. And I'll give a wonderful example. A girl, 8-year-old girl, she raised her hand and she said to Neil deGrasse Tyson, famous astrophysicist, I'm dyspraxic, which is neurodiverse. It's where it's a neurological disorder of the words. I'm dyspraxic. Can I be a scientist, she asked him. And he burst out laughing, like a belly laugh, like that. And he said, are you kidding me? Everyone, nearly everyone within the scientific community, 90%, are neurodiverse, on the spectrum, light sensitive. If you're not dyspraxic or not autistic, it's almost a disadvantage to enter those communities because of the way we think. And could you just reframe me? Could you bring me back onto the second part, the last point of it?
So you had mentioned earlier that there are neurodiverse people at the core of some of the biggest inventions.
Yes.
So how do we identify that we're working with someone who's neurodiverse who just needs to be, you need to just have different patterns of working with them?
So identifying it is difficult because not everyone will want to come out because of the stigma, because a lot of people also think that you won't employ us if we tell you. But you can identify it usually. I don't want to go too much into traits or characteristics because everyone's so difficult and different, and it's difficult to try and play Sherlock, I guess, in diagnosing. But stimming is a huge part of my behaviours. I stim a lot, flap a lot, and hum a lot. But I can always tell when autistic people are near me because they'll just carry on talking about their focused interest.
You can pick people in a crowd that are autistic. I noticed you do that a couple of times.
Oh yeah. I'd have to like interact and engage with people for a little bit, but I'd be able to tell if they're neurodiverse within a few minutes.
Yeah. And you remember every little detail from every meeting, like photographic memory. It was crazy. You could recall the shoes I was wearing and the coat I was wearing.
Yeah.
In our short meeting we had several months ago.
This is it. In crew, basically, I can see the whole room, and I can see where you are. You're on the right-hand side of the round table at the front, and I can see you here and here in 2 different countries and 2 different times, and it can become overloading, but it's a wonderful skill set because it means I can operate with 9 or 10 different channels on, and it means that with Agony Autie, we are the brains, we are the video makers, we're the business operations, we have our minds in all the pies because
crazy.
no one else will do it. So we will do it for our goddamn selves until we get the help.
It's amazing to have you speak about it because some other experiences I've had with autistic neurodiverse people, they tend to be very introverted. And I think, and if I'm not being politically correct about this, but you're one of those rare extroverted autistic people.
I think
how does that whole spectrum work?
I think it's funny because I am definitely extrovert. My husband's more introvert, and you'll meet some autistic people who won't really want to talk with you, and that's totally cool, I get it. However, I'm extrovert because I'm talking about my special interest, autism and neurodiversity. This is my focus, this is my hobby, this is my life, this is my love. And I've loved it ever since I was a young girl. So try to talk to me about anything else. I'm going to be struggling a little bit. I'll just bring it back to autism. Let's talk about that. Yeah, there's so much to talk. Let's talk about that.
Do you think that just in comparison, where we are in working with and adapting to and adapting our environments to the autistic neurodiverse community, would you compare it with where we were in other marginalized groups like a few decades ago, whether it's based on race or sexual orientation?
Absolutely. I would, and I have to be very careful to not appropriate. And whenever I look to other stigmatized and marginalized communities, I do so with the greatest respect, and I do so to look at how did they overcome adversity, because there's a lot of adversity that autistic people and neurodiverse people go through, mainly that people still think we're a disease of the mind. The way that homosexuality was being taught as a disease of the mind. And what that means is that autistic people, when I say the shame to be autistic is this, they don't think we're normal. I'm not normal. If only I was normal, then I could do X, Y, Z. If only I wasn't autistic. This myth of normalcy is what does make us ill, and if only we could love our autistic virtues. And that does mean there's hard times. Punching yourself in the face in an overload is the worst experience you could ever go through. I always think, why am I like this? Why? But then I remember it's because I am in great pain. I am greatly struggling to process, and every time I learn from it. But I will never learn from it if all I get is, you're broken, you're wrong, you're full of challenging behaviour. And Agony Autie has been about decoding that challenging behaviour and actually saying to you, it's not that, it's because I'm having PTSD flashback memory, which is very visual for me, so very traumatic, or having sense memories, or there's something in the environment bothering me. And I'm at a privileged position to do that because I'm verbal, and not all autistic people are. So yes, extrovert, verbal, but also talking about my interest. It can be great employment material if you support us correctly and focus on the individual's needs.
Do you have tips for us on what are some immediate things we can do to become more sensitive and adaptable to neurodiverse people in our workforce, especially here in Silicon Valley? Like I bet.
Oh God, they're everywhere. Yeah, absolutely. You'll just, when you realise that neurodiversity is just a normal part of life, it will be normal. It's what Harvey Milk said, the great Harvey Milk, who is my icon. And this is his hometown in San Francisco. So this is a dream for me to even be here. He said to everyone who was gay in the 70s, he said, come out, because once that they know at least one of us, it will change everything. Because neurodiverse people, everyone who put their hands up, you already know them, but they serve you your cups of tea, they press your lift buttons, they're creating your tech, they're sending people out to space, they are the reason you have the internet. We are here, we're just not seen. And that's the great tragedy.
One last thing I'll ask you is, what are some of the more immediate issues you see the community facing, but more importantly, how can we seek out and hire neurodiverse people? Are there groups, are there associations, are there, hiring events we could participate in?
Yeah.
Because I know we actively do in the UK, but I don't know a lot in the US.
Yeah, well, Microsoft in the US are doing awesome at the moment because their whole diversity, they look at disability diversity, but they're very aware because they're like, this whole place is full of autistics. Maybe we should make an autism program for the ones with more complex needs to join in too. because this is quite, internal bias. Because the autistics who can talk, can be extrovert, and can be most supported, that's great if they can get there. But what about the ones with more obvious behaviours? The ones with the stims which are loud, or with Tourette's, or with tics? Why can't they be here too? It's not an excuse to say that they're just disruptive. That is neurophobic. And it may not be recognised like that now, but it will in 10 years. Right, bring back to the last point of your question. Just the last point.
Are there communities we can actively seek out and hire neurodiverse
Yes.
talent?
So basically, in the US, I know a lot of neurodiversity groups are starting to pop up in universities and campuses. Steve Silverman, the author of Neurotribes, I'm meeting him tomorrow, by the way, I can't wait. He's been trying to go to universities to get, champion the next generations before they come out there, to be open about their neurodiversity. But in terms of approaching people, I just think that as a company, you need to be proud. You need to be proud of the fact that that diversity exists. You need to be proud of the fact that you want to try, and you also need to recognise that you're dipping your toe into a community that really is undervalued. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to get it wrong.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid if you offend us by saying the wrong thing. What matters is your intent, is that you're trying. Please just at least come and say, how can we help? Talking to autistic people is the best way to go about it.